It was a cold, misty morning in London on November 13, 1536. The streets of Cheapside, one of the city's busiest commercial areas, were shrouded in fog. The air was thick with smoke from countless chimneys, mingling with the damp mist rolling in from the Thames. In the early hours, as the city slowly awakened, a lone figure stepped out of his house in Needler's Lane, carrying a small lantern to light his way. This man was Robert Pakington, merchant, member of Parliament, and an outspoken critic of the Catholic clergy. He was on his way to morning mass at the Mercer's Chapel, as he did every day. But this day would be different. This day, he would not make it to church. As he crossed Cheapside, approaching the Great Conduit, a large public water fountain in the middle of the street, a man with a cart blocked his path. Pakington paused for a moment, perhaps waiting for the man to move, when suddenly a single shot rang out. The silence of the morning was shattered by the sharp explosion of gunpowder. Within seconds, Pakington collapsed to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The crowd that quickly gathered stood in shock. A man of standing, a respected merchant and politician, had just been murdered in the street. But there was something even more shocking. No one saw the killer. No one saw a gun. Firearms were still a relatively new technology in England in the early 16th century. The most common guns at the time were large, cumbersome matchlock arquebuses, over a meter long, requiring both hands to use, with a glowing match to ignite the powder. A man walking through the streets of London with one of these would have been highly visible, but the assassin who killed Pakington had used something different: a wheel-lock pistol. The wheel-lock, a more advanced firearm, was small enough to be concealed under a cloak. It didn't require an exposed burning match, making it perfect for an assassin. Pakington's murder is now believed to be the first recorded handgun killing in London. Despite the offer of a large reward for information, no one was ever arrested. The assassin had melted into the darkness, and the crime went unsolved. To understand why Robert Pakington was murdered, one must look at his life. Born in Stanford-on-Thamesay, Worcestershire, around 1489, he was the second or third son of John Pakington and Elizabeth Washbourne. Like many ambitious young men, he moved to London and became a merchant, completing a 10-year apprenticeship with the Mercer's Company in 1510. By 1527, he had risen through the ranks to serve as a warden of the company. Pakington was not just a businessman, he was also politically active. He was elected to Parliament in 1533 and again in 1536. His political stance was clear. He was a staunch Protestant and deeply critical of the Catholic Church. He spoke out against what he saw as the greed and corruption of the clergy, aligning himself with the reformist policies of Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's chief minister. At a time when England was on the brink of religious transformation, his outspokenness made him enemies. Several theories emerged about who might have wanted Robert Pakington dead. The most widely accepted theory is that Pakington was killed on the orders of someone within the Catholic Church. His open criticism of the clergy made him a target. Edward Hall, a chronicler of the time, wrote that Pakington had spoken somewhat against the covetousness and cruelty of the clergy. Given the intense religious conflict in England at the time, this could have been enough to mark him for death. John Foxe, the famous Protestant historian, later claimed that a priest had confessed to the murder on his deathbed, but no official records exist to confirm this claim. Pakington's ties to Thomas Cromwell and the Protestant Reformation may have also played a role in his murder. England was in a period of great instability. Henry VIII had just executed Anne Boleyn 6 months earlier, and the dissolution of the monasteries was underway. The conservative pro-Catholic faction at court saw Cromwell and his supporters as dangerous. Killing Pakington may have been a warning to others in Cromwell's circle. Another possibility is that Pakington was killed for reasons unrelated to politics or religion. As a wealthy merchant, he may have made enemies in the business world. Some have suggested that Pakington's murder may have been an opportunistic act of violence, perhaps a hired assassin testing out a new weapon. However, the precision of the attack and the fact that no robbery took place makes this theory unlikely. Pakington's death sent shockwaves through London. It was not just that he had been killed, it was how he had been killed. Firearms were rare in England at the time, and the use of a pistol suggested a level of premeditation and sophistication that was unsettling. The murder remained unsolved, but it did not go unnoticed. It became a symbol of the rising tensions between Catholics and Protestants in England. Within 4 years of Pakington's assassination, Henry VIII would break entirely from the Pope, declaring himself supreme head of the Church of England. Thomas Cromwell, Pakington's ally, would oversee the destruction of monasteries, redistributing their wealth to the crown. Pakington's name would be remembered in Protestant history. John Foxe, writing in his Acts and Monuments, better known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs, included Pakington's murder as an example of Catholic persecution. Whether or not his killing was directly linked to the Church, it was certainly used as Protestant propaganda. Pakington was buried in St. Pancras Old Churchyard. His family would go on to become prominent figures in England. His grandson, Sir John Pakington, became a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I. His widow Catherine later married Sir Michael Dormer, a mercer who became Lord Mayor of London in 1541. His children were taken into the guardianship of Sir John Baldwin, his first father-in-law, who was then Lord Chief Justice of Common Pleas. Though his murder remains officially unsolved, Robert Pakington's death marked a turning point in England's history. It was a sign of the times, an era of religious upheaval, political intrigue, and rising violence. His assassination foreshadowed the brutal conflicts that would come in the decades that followed. From the execution of Thomas Cromwell to the bloody reign of Mary I and beyond. And so, on that foggy morning in 1536, Robert Pakington became not only the first man in London to be murdered with a handgun, but also a symbol of the dangerous, shifting world of Tudor England.